There are moments when transformation doesn't arrive as clarity, it arrives as collapse. Everything you've built suddenly feels hollow. Perhaps it begins with an inexplicable unease, a quiet panic settling into your chest. The career you worked toward, the relationships you've maintained, the daily patterns you followed, none of it resonates anymore. What is happening is quite depression, though it shares its weight. This transcends burnout or existential crisis. It is not simply a rough patch or cosmic misalignment. You've entered what Carl Jung identified as the dark night of the soul. Here is a part rarely discussed. This experience carries profound meaning, yet feels utterly meaningless in the moment. It resembles death without the release of dying. While Saint John of the Cross originally described this phenomenon in the 16th century, Jung recognized its psychological significance. He viewed it not as pathology but as essential passage, a collision with the unconscious that fractures the ego's protective shell. The agony stems from this very fracturing. Your identity, that carefully assembled sense of self, must disintegrate before authenticity can emerge. This process offers no gentleness. You might fear you are losing sanity. What is actually dissolving is illusion. The spiritual journey reveals its raw underbelly here. There is nothing polished or photogenic about it. It manifests as unexplained tears in parking lots, emotional numbness, while others appear fine existential questioning that strips meaning from everything. This represents the necessary destruction preceding genuine transformation. The most isolating aspect. Others rarely comprehend in a culture obsessed with productivity, image, and certainty. Falling apart registers as failure. What should be recognized as spiritual refinement gets mislabeled as weakness or dysfunction. But consider this possibility: the collapse isn't malfunction. It is design. Jung understood that the soul possesses its own wisdom. When life structures no longer serve your authentic truth, the soul rebels. It dismantles outdated patterns not as punishment, but to create space for what is real. If you are currently here, feeling untethered, alienated, fundamentally out of sync, you are not damaged, you are in the crucible. And that fire, however excruciating, is forging something essential. This video examines what is truly unfolding beneath this darkness, revealing the sacred intelligence within your suffering. For now, simply breathe. You are not alone. In fact, you may be closer to your authentic self than you've ever been. If you are drawn to content exploring consciousness and life as deeper dimensions, subscribe to Fractal Wisdom. There is much more to discover, and by this video's end, your understanding of awakening will fundamentally shift. Nobody mentions that awakening begins not with illumination but with silence. A silence so complete it consumes every version of who you believed yourself to be. This isn't mere sadness or confusion. You are experiencing an internal seismic event. The foundational plates of your identity, beliefs, ambitions, emotional patterns are shifting and reorganizing without your consent. Jung described individuation as becoming whole through integrating the shadow, the unconscious, the disowned aspects of self. But here is the unvarnished truth. Before wholeness comes complete fragmentation. To encounter your true self, you must first release the version constructed from fear, approval, seeking, survival instinct, and conformity. Consider this carefully. You were never taught shadow work. You learned niceness, functionality, meeting expectations. But nobody showed you how to grieve the life you thought you should live. When internal collapse begins, when career, relationships, and values no longer resonate, you question your mental stability. What if this isn't dysfunction, but integration? Imagine your psyche has been maintaining a false self for years, perhaps decades, and now simply cannot continue. It refuses to, your soul, quietly but insistently, at integration, is calling you home. Yet the homecoming initially feels like banishment. Old emotions surface: grief, anger, guilt, fear of wasted years, pursuing wrong things. Strangely, these feelings may not even belong to present circumstances. They re-echoes buried childhood grief, unprocessed rage, emotional fragments stored in the body, awaiting permission to be witnessed. Now they finally emerging, not to torture you, but to liberate you. This is what people misunderstand about spiritual awakening. It is not exclusively about light, love, and elevated frequencies. It involves descent, depth, and meeting the parts you abandoned in darkness. Jung stated it perfectly. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. This isn't an ending. This is sacred composting of the obsolete. It is psychic digestion of everything misaligned. Yes, it resembles chaos. But beneath that chaos, intelligence operates. You are not disintegrating, you are shedding, you are not regressing, you are remembering, you are not failing. You are finally feeling that is not weakness, that is healing. Eventually, you reach a point where the pain becomes familiar, not improved or easier, just less shocking. You stop asking, when will this end? And start whispering, what is this trying to reveal? That is where the paradox opens, the suffering, confusion, and spiritual exhaustion, anti-punishment. It is not karmic retribution. It is not evidence of brokenness. It is happening for something. That something is revelation. Here is the great spiritual paradox. Your lowest point can be your truest initiation. This isn't motivational rhetoric. It is metaphysical principle. You cannot embody light without reconciling with darkness, not superficial reconciliation through reframing or journaling it away. Real reconciliation, the gritty kind where you sit in your mess and say, okay, show me. This is Jung's concept of holding the tension of opposites, light and dark, pain and purpose, suffering and transformation. He understood what most self-help literature omits. The psyche doesn't evolve by avoiding discomfort. It evolves through conscious engagement with it. Here is what disrupts conventional thinking. Once you genuinely feel your pain, truly listen to it, it begins transforming, not because you've solved it, but because you've stopped fleeing from it. Jung observed, neurosis is always a substitute for legitimate suffering. Most anxiety, overthinking, even spiritual bypassing, it is camouflage, distraction from deeper, cleaner pain we're meant to experience. When we stop resisting that pain, healing initiates. So what is the dark night of the soul? Truly, it is the soul's detoxification of falsehood, removal of spiritual armor, incineration of masks. It is a breakdown orchestrated by deeper intelligence within you, declaring you are ready for authenticity. But first, we remove what isn't tea. However harsh this sounds, your suffering carries sacred purpose, not because pain is holy, but because of what it reveals. It shows where you've betrayed yourself for acceptance, where you've numbed instead of felt, where you've remained small to feel safe in suffering. Clarity, something luminous emerges, not enlightenment, not peace, but truth, clear, brutal, beautiful truth. And truth heals. This is why mystics, psychologists, and trauma therapists echo the same wisdom in different languages. The wound is the womb, the collapse is the birth canal, the shadow is the doorway to divinity. If you are hurting deeply, spiritually, existentially, don't rush to fix it. Sit with it. Question it. Let it speak. The pain isn't the problem. The silence surrounding the pain is. Once you stop trying to quiet it, once you give it space at your table, something extraordinary occurs. You begin hearing your soul, not the ego, not the voice demanding fixes, checklists, or instant healing the soul. That quiet whisper beneath everything, gently telling you, let it fall apart. Something more honest awaits you. That is rebirth as beginning. But many people get stuck right before this moment, when dark night pain becomes overwhelming, and it can feel unbearable. We reach for anything that numbs it. Alcohol to sleep, overworking, excessive screen time, overeating. Even spiritual practices can become avoidance mechanisms if we are not careful. Another way to dodge sitting with the raw ache of being human. Here is the unglamorous truth. If you numb the pain, you also numb the transformation. Pain is information, sacred feedback, your soul saying, pay attention. Something you've been avoiding wants your love, your awareness, your integration. If you drown that out with substances, distractions, even forced positivity, you delay genuine healing. How do you navigate the dark night without being consumed? You slow down, you feel everything. You let yourself break where you've always been brittle. You stop treating sadness like a malfunction to fix, and instead you hold it with presence, with breath, with fierce compassion. You cry when needed, scream into pillows, journal the mess without editing. Let the body shiver through buried grief. Talk to someone safe, a therapist, a friend, even a tree. It is all valid. Most importantly, you stop performing okay when you are not. This is what spiritual awakening truly is. The holy act of becoming emotionally honest, becoming available to yourself in your most unfiltered form. Then gradually, subtly, a shift begins. The heaviness doesn't vanish instantly, but it softens. Your breath deepens slightly. Mornings feel less heavy. You laugh, really laugh, for the first time in months. That is rebirth. It is not loud or dramatic. It is gentle, unfolding, quietly revolutionary. One day you wake up and realize you no longer crave the distractions. You no longer need validation from people who never truly saw you. You're not running from life anymore. You're in it fully. That is when you know you're truly awakening, because enlightenment isn't escape from being human. It is full embrace of it, with your scars, your softness, your shadow, your sacredness, all included. Jung believed wholeness, not perfection, was the goal. The dark night strips away falsehood so you can meet wholeness. Yes, it is brutal, but beyond that brutality lies freedom. Not fantasy freedom, but the kind where you no longer betray yourself to belong, where you can sit with discomfort without self-abandonment, where your joy isn't manic but rooted, steady, quietly unshakable. You'll begin noticing the world differently. Colors feel more vivid, conversations feel more honest, even silence feels like home now, because you've met yourself in the dark, and you didn't run. That is the real initiation. Not avoiding the pain, but walking through it and realizing that who you really are was never the one suffering, the one observing the suffering. That is you. That is the soul. That is the light that was never broken to begin with. If you're in the thick of it right now, if your world feels like ash and noise, know this. You're not crazy. You're being reborn. No. It is not glamorous. It is deeply human. And that is what makes it sacred. Before you go, I'd love to hear from you. Have you experienced a moment when everything seemed to be falling apart, but looking back, you recognize it as the beginning of something deeper? Share it in the comments. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. If you're drawn to content that goes beyond surface level, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. This channel exists for the thinkers, the feelers, and those waking up to something real. You made it through the dark. And from here, everything changes. Welcome back to yourself.